Hey guys, I want to take a little bit of time and talk about something that is most likely going to get me absolutely torched out of every direction. I mean, our friends on the left are absolutely going to hate it because, spoiler alert to the end of the video, I have a feeling that the Donald can win both the primary and the general. And my friends over on the MAGA crowd are going to hate it because, well, I'm not going to vote for the guy. That's part of the reason I decided to make this series of videos, and something I expressed while I was making the DeSantis video. I have no interest in voting for Donald Trump again for the third time. I swallowed my pride and did it in 2020 based on some comments that he had made about federalism right before the election, and some of the things that were at stake if the Biden presidency were to come in. And I hate to tell you this, but I was absolutely right about all of those things. You can throw one in the J. Edgar was right jar again. But yeah, pretty much everything that I said would come to pass has already come to pass, and it's even become far worse at this point here. And of course, my DeSantis-loving friends are going to rush out to screech about it because, well, spoiler alert, I think he's going to win the primary too, putting their favorite candidate into the dustbin of history. Somebody who should have sat out and waited till 2028, and somebody who actually probably could have had a very, very viable political career. The only thing that's going to save him in Florida at this point is the fact that the demographics have shifted so far in Florida that I don't think that any Republican can lose the governorship for years and years to come. But we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about the Donald. This video is going to be in 3 parts. They're all going to be contiguous, but there are going to be basically 3 chapters of this video. Why I won't vote for him, why I think he can win the primary, and where I think that he stands on the general, because that is actually going to be much, much more up in the air, and there are a lot of factors that are going to play into that are basically still up in the air at this point. So we'll get right down into it. This may actually clear a half an hour. I know that I said I wanted to make these videos about 10 minutes or so in length, and then turned around and came out with a 25-minute report on where I saw Ron DeSantis. But I do think that there's a lot to talk about with this. Now, it has not been a secret that I have no plans on voting for Donald Trump the third time. I did it excitedly in 2016. With one of the big caveats being, and I said this at the time, that voting for Donald Trump made it okay for the rest of us to go to try to get into politics, to try to break into some of this, to actually come in and attempt to change the system from the inside. I know that a lot of us didn't have Donald Trump money. We didn't have Donald Trump fame. But to see somebody come from the absolute outside of the political establishment with absolutely nothing backing him up, and actually the vast majority of the institutions standing against him, meant that if you wanted to go get on your local school board, it was okay for you to go back and run against whatever incumbent machine politics are in your local municipality. Many of you being in the city, being able to do so. Now, if you're out in rural Wisconsin or rural West Virginia or out in the middle of nowhere Wyoming, it's probably a lot easier for you as the layperson to get onto your school board. But in Kenosha, Madison, Eau Claire, Chicago, Detroit, or all these other big places out there, if you're not a part of the in crowd, then you're at a point of why even bother? Because there's going to be a lot of money coming in to make sure that you don't see the inside and how the goose is cooked. And there was a lot of money that poured in to make sure that the Donald Trump didn't get to the inside and didn't get to see how the goose was cooked. I'm going to be completely honest with my position on Donald Trump. I am about halfway between believing that if he does manage to get in, they're terrified of him getting in and blowing the lid open on everything and letting us see all the classification, and that he actually is in league with a lot of these morons that have been in the government forever, whom he has donated to forever and ever and ever, amen. Because it gives the little person, the working class, the illusion of choice. And that once he gets in there, he'll come in and say, "Oh, I got blocked. I can't come out and show you the documents." It is so hard to get a read on him because, number one, of his political history, and number two, because of the way that they are treating him as he is coming out to run. There is no question about the fact that there has been a major effort, whether it's for show or whether it's for an actual fear that he's going to get in there, but there's been a major effort to make sure that Donald Trump does not ascend to the presidency again. Now, why I won't vote for him? It's very simple. Spending. I went into the beginning of the Trump presidency with a measure of hope that he was going to block some of these big bills, he was going to stop some of the spending coming out of the government, at least bring it back down to levels where I understand, and I'm one of these people too, where I am against government aid in all levels possible. I am very, very, very much against people getting a handout, but I understand that there are people that need it. A lot of these programs need to have a lot of the fat cut off of them because there are a lot of politicians that are getting rich over the fact that they can skim off the top of them. If I was the one in charge, I would be pulling out all the stops to make our economy so well and make sure that there are so many jobs that people have to outbid each other for more workers so that nobody has to be on government assistance anymore. That would be my goal. Now, we were actually moving in that direction under the Trump presidency. We'll go into that a little bit more when I talk about the general election at the end of the video, but we were actually moving in that direction. Where I go with this, of course, is that was one of the hopes, because one of the promises that we got in the primary was that he had a plan and he could do this and he could solve the national debt. He could solve it almost immediately. It would only take a year, maybe a second year, to get in there and solve the national debt. He could go get it all paid off and it'd all be hunky-dory. Instead, when we came down into big government shutdowns, when we heard about, okay, well, here's the omnibus here, and he's going to block it because it's got foreign aid for this, and it's got aid for that, and it's got this provision that is way overspent, and it's got this provision in it that'll help Democrats, and everything else that we heard about that on the first one, when they shut the government down, eventually, and this was, it took them 6 weeks to get it all squared away and done, where he came back out and signed it, and we got a promise from him that said, okay, I'm going to sign this one because I gotta get the federal workers back to work. Can't have people losing their houses. But this will be the last one I sign. You're going to bring me a balanced budget after this. And then we got 3 more omnibuses. That was the point where I was off the Trump train. That was the point where I was done. When the second one got signed, I said, no, we're not doing this again. This is where I can understand where some of the more fiscal conservatives and the classic conservatives got on his ass and pointed out the fact that he was a lifelong Democrat. And I will come out and say that I liked a lot of the things that were done during the Trump presidency, but the fact of the matter is, I looked through and I watched the rhetoric that was going through this and the things that they were saying about him on the TV. For the people who were still watching TV, and he was one of them. And it was the fact that they always brought up, and I solemnly believe this is the reason that he signed the omnibus. That the reason that he did so is because they kept saying, oh, well, he might not win re-election. He might become unpopular if he doesn't come out and sign this. If he doesn't sign this massive check to government special interests, the people might hate him. He might not be popular. Oh my God, no! And to see a politician who literally has control over the military, the budget, and the nukes that can be swayed by public opinion that much. I mean, That's part of the reason I stopped voting for Democrats in the first place. Is because they put so much effort on public opinion and buying votes. I'm an anti-government person. Now, of course, there are other reasons for the Donald, and my lack of desire to vote for him, big one of those. And I was reading a thread over on X, formerly known as Twitter, right before I got started with this, he was talking about Biden's age and why this. I'm going to talk about this in the general election part too, but Joe Biden is too old. They're saying on the TV that he's too old, but what about Trump and what he did? And one of the things that was pointed out in the thread was that Donald Trump had promised, and this was one of the reasons that I actually did not really want to vote for him at the time, even all the way back in 2016, that it wasn't going to be get rid of the ACA. He was going to get rid of the ACA, and he always said Obamacare because, well, it cemented in the minds of the people he was stealing away from the Democratic side of the aisle, the union workers and the people like that he was so anti-Obama that he was going to get rid of Obamacare and he was going to replace it with something else. To a point where I had always said, why do we need to replace it? There's no reason to replace Obamacare. Get rid of it. Make it so the insurance companies have to sell you insurance again instead of the fact that you're a guaranteed customer. Because there are laws in the books that say that thou must have insurance. Meaning that you are an automatic customer as long as you are living and breathing air. You want to see those rates go down? Get rid of first off, get rid of the law. And I understand too. I mean, while he was in office, he did bring the penalty down to zero, basically making it so it was a non-issue for you to not have insurance. And we saw some balance in the rates because people were opting to just basically check the box in their tax form and give the finger to the government. So they couldn't go back and jack the rates anymore because, hey, people might keep going without it. They might say the hell with it. So that was another big reason why I cannot vote for him again. I've seen too many problems with this. And now, even still, while he's out on the campaign trail, I have really nothing to bring to the table from him other than the fact of it's a big middle finger to the system. Thank you, Styx, for that observation about it. It is a massive middle finger to the system because they're trying so hard to persecute him. And he'll get rid of Joe Biden and some of the spending. Other than that, all that I hear is, I totally won 2020. And the only person standing in the way of these people, keeping them from going to you, totally won 2020. And these people have pulled out all the stops, and the only way to do it, to stop them from doing so, is to elect me. The Democrat playbook. Over and over again. And that's a part of the reason that he appeals to the block of MAGA that came from the Union Partyist Democrats. Now, why will he win the primary? In spite of everything that I've said, all the broken promises, and all the absolute drama that happened during his presidency, Donald Trump is a shoo-in to win. The primary, at least. Think about what we have here, and think about what I said during the DeSantis video. The biggest swath of Republican voters at this point are Reform Democrats who were left behind by the Obama administration, whose major fiscal goals were to make our entire economy into a service economy. You saw it with their conversations about the minimum wage. You saw it with the ideas of trying to unionize various retail places where people could go in and start working as teenagers and just continue to work the same job for the rest of their lives, that kind of thing. It's interesting because I lived in Kenosha, and I actually saw this in practice and how it went, where there really wasn't any place for at the time for you to go to work in Kenosha. I know some of the stuff started to come in, especially with Amazon building both a big transport facility and a sorting distribution facility right on the edge of Kenosha. But as I was getting up there to leave, if you wanted to go to work and you lived in Kenosha, you were either commuting, sometimes as far as the farthest end of Milwaukee, or even down into some of the northern tips of Chicago, at the very minimum into some of the north suburbs. You were either doing that, or you were serving people who were also doing service jobs. You were working in the deli in the grocery store, serving the bank teller, who is opening up accounts for people who are working at the local Dunkin' Donuts and Starbucks, and it was basically an economy of people serving each other. That's, if you look at the way that it was structured, and even some of the structure that's coming in through the Biden economy, that seems to be where we're moving into it. We're getting rid of some of the manufacturing. I know Biden comes back and tells, "Hey, I made this many manufacturing jobs, and look how great I am." And well, the chips jobs, the things like that, and the supply chains that you keep snarling up over and over again are starting to fall apart based on the fact that nobody has the money to go out and buy the new vehicles, that your factory workers don't have to go into the factory and make. And we are still importing things from all over the world right now, and again, it does appear very much on the surface that we're turning into an economy that's just one service industry serving the other service industry. Donald Trump spoke to the union worker whose jobs were left behind by that type of economy. People whose jobs were moved over to China. People whose jobs were moved over to Turkey, who were suddenly left in a situation where there was no place to go to work in the town that they were living in at the time. So the idea was either that they had to commute X amount of distance, or pick up whatever grocery store, sweep behind the counter, work at the deli, stand at the cash register job that they could muster up. He spoke to those people. And one of the first things he said when Barack Obama said, "Oh, these jobs, they're just never coming back. There's no reason to have these jobs anymore. They pollute. And they make climate change. And it's not climate change as long as it comes out of China, okay? There's no reason for this. 2% growth? That's the norm now." Whereas Donald came out and said, "I'm going to get these jobs back. I'm going to negotiate. Bring them back in. Jobs for everybody. Because we can make it here. And I want everything to have that big, beautiful label that says, Made in America." And he spoke to these people in a way that Republicans really didn't for a long, long time. The union was a foregone conclusion for Democrats for almost my entire life. And I know that because I grew up in a union house. My dad was a union worker, and my maternal grandfather was a union worker. I have union on both sides of me. And he could come out and say, "Okay, these people left you behind. They don't want you to have these jobs anymore. They want to send them overseas. And what we're doing overseas, it's the worst thing we can possibly do. So vote for me, your favorite president, and I'll bring these jobs back." It was not only that, but the progressive movement had pushed so much favor. Instead of the working class people that pushed them into power to begin with, moving into these college-educated people who were working in some of the higher-end jobs that the people in the union couldn't even begin to hope for because they didn't go out and get that fancy degree and get themselves tens, 15s, 20,000s, even hundreds of thousands of dollars into debt. They got straight out of high school and went straight to work. And, I mean, the progressives look down their nose on these people. They're the others. They're the rubes. And if you want to have a job, why would you ever want to go back and pull the lever and stamp out what's on the factory line again? If you really want the job, then go back to school and, well, because of a bunch of people saying these things to journalists when they got laid off, 3 words that I can't actually say on YouTube. A lot of the people who are going to come out for the primaries, remember this. They remember how good the economy was. They remember when they started seeing some of their jobs come back and people start competing for the workers, the displaced workers, the ones who hadn't walked away. And there were even people who were coming out of retirement based on the fact that they could make a buttload more money. Even taking up one of these jobs that was displaced. I saw a lot of retirees, people, even some people who took early retirement, who were running out to grab a banker job, a basic bank teller job, or run a cash register at the local grocery store, or go back to working full time in any number of these other jobs out here, because the people who were displaced from the factory work were starting to go back to their blue-collar industrial factory work jobs because those jobs were showing up, and suddenly there were vacancies in all these other jobs. And these people, even on a simple job like that, at post-retirement, they could make a buttload more money going and doing that job again and saving their Social Security for years later. A lot of people remember that because they're more than 3 years old. While Barack Obama ran his entire campaign and his presidency on hope and change, it's going to be hope and change, for a lot of the people who were traditionally Democrat, the Donald actually gave them hope and change. And he did change a lot of minds. From first election to second primary, there were a lot more people who, even under the midst of all the lockdownerism, all the complaints and all the media backlash, who don't want to see the same thing that they hated while they were Democrats. They didn't want to see another Jeb Bush or a Ron DeSantis, who I could go into more and more him, but I've already done 25 minutes on that. Or Nikki Haley, or a Tim Scott, or an Asa Hutchinson, who are the traditional Republican, who they were all told were only for the rich. Their unions told them for years that these people were only for the rich. And in some cases, their unions told them, if you vote for these people, your job is going to go overseas. In spite of the fact that a lot of their jobs went overseas under a Democrat. But we'll move past that for a while. But they don't want to go back into the same Republican Party that they had shunned when they were Democrats. They want somebody who listened to them, who reached out to them, who talked to them. And they will come out in droves to the polls to vote for him in the primaries. They absolutely will. They'll make a party out of it. There are probably going to be people drinking beer in the polling line with all their MAGA regalia and an American flag t-shirt, which I know a lot of people love to come back out and complain about the fact that you can't put the American flag on clothing because it's against flag code, and then those same people turn around and violate flag code anyway. We'll get past that as well, but there is going to be a drove to go back out and put Donald Trump's name on the primary ballot in a way that there wasn't for W, thank God for that, or Dole, or any number of people who came before. It's going to be like another MAGA rally in a lot of these places. Now, can he win the general? That seems to be the question on everybody's mind, and whether you're talking about the DeSantis people or the paid Democrat shills or the media people who are out there, that seems to be the thing that's coming forward. Why would you ever vote for him in the primary? Because he can't win the general. Well, I don't know that I actually believe that. And there are a lot of things that are still up in the air as to whether or not he can win in the general. One of the big things is going to be when and how badly this economy crashes, and it is. It's teetering on the edge, folks. I don't understand why people don't see that. There is going to be a big crash. Prices are going to come down on new vehicles, and prices are going to come down on housing, especially if the layoffs continue going in the direction that they're going, to a point where a lot of the people who bought during the pandemic and shortly after, when the houses were so far inflated, are going to be on the edge of losing everything, because between the layoff and the fact that they can't get the money back out of the house that they paid for, are going to be in a lot of trouble once the bills start to come due. I mean, it's going to be great for people like me who are currently in the midst of house hunting and house searching, because, hey, I'm back at that point where I can get pre-approved for a mortgage, and I'm starting to see some of these prices come down even from where they were a year ago when I started looking in this area. It's going to be great for guys like me. But as for the rest of the people out there who are losing equity in a loan that a lot of people advise them they shouldn't have taken in the beginning, that bill's going to come due at some point. The inflation is continuing to go up and up and up. They keep telling us that, oh, well, he brought the inflation down. Well, why is it still going up? It's going up slower, but that's because you're compounding on top of 9% from the year before. Real prices, especially for food, are up a full 16 to 17% over what they were at the beginning of the pandemic. And that is going to make it harder for people to go out and spend on cool things that they want to go back out and require people to go out and make. I mean, if you're spending all your money on food and your kid wants the latest PlayStation, what are you going to be thinking about when you're going Christmas shopping right around election time and having to tell little Timmy that, oh, hey, I can't get you the newest Xbox because it's either that or we don't eat for a few weeks. But the big question there is going to be, when does that crash? It is the economy, stupid. There are other factors in there, whether or not they're going to get a disqualification under the 14th Amendment. I mean, there are a lot of people that are out there trying to say that, well, he's already disqualified because he gave comfort to his enemies. And you want to know the stupidest thing is, because the Donald is right now going out and raising millions of dollars for Giuliani's defense fund, that means he's disqualified under the 14th Amendment because he's giving comfort to an enemy of the United States. And the United States that is calling its own citizens enemies of the United States has got bigger problems than whether or not a mild reformer gets back into office, who's going to do much of the same things that many of the Democrats that came before him did. I think there is a very, very, very real chance that Donald Trump goes Grover Cleveland. And unfortunately, that is going to mean that there is going to be unrest on the ground when it happens. There's also a very real chance that he loses in 2024. And unfortunately, that also means that there's going to be a large amount of unrest on the ground if he does. The whole country is wound up so tight that I'm not sure where it ends, and that does frighten me just a little bit. I would like to see a different candidate run for the Republican nomination. Unfortunately, the only real other person who I think could have any sort of viability among the American people, does not appear to be running for the presidency so much as he is running to take some of the heat off Donald. That is Vivek Ramaswamy. I'll talk about him in a separate video. But what it all comes down to, where it all goes, and I said this in my Discord server not that long ago about Joe Biden, because one of my friends had pointed out the fact that with the fact that we're closing down more oil leases in this country means that gas prices are going to rise again, and this is going to guarantee a loss for the Biden admin coming up in 2024. I pointed out the fact that I don't think that's actually the case. I think that they're coming out there flexing their power and saying, hey, we can make you suffer as much as you want, as much as we want, rather. And we will still get reelected. There is no more hope. If you voted for Donald Trump, you were enemies of the state. There's a lot of that rhetoric, too, going around. When we look at some of the other people that they're trying to go after, Tucker Carlson, they want to throw criminal charges at him. Obviously, of course, the 18 other co-defendants in the RICO case. There have been calls to imprison anybody who voted for Donald. Now, of course, the people that are doing that are morons on X, formerly known as Twitter. Not actually people making policy. That's about the only thing that you can possibly take amongst yourselves to feel safe about this right now, but the calls are already out there to do so. And of course, Elon Musk, they're cooking up charges against him right now because he lets the MAGA people speak freely out on his platform of X, and we cannot allow that to happen. And oh no, he cut off Starlink as the Ukrainians were making a counteroffensive. Now, nobody died in the counteroffensive, but he cut off X in the midst of that, which means that he's working as a foreign agent. I forget which act it was that he violated for that one. It was Logan, I think? Because Hatch is the one where you can't campaign while you're on official duty. So, yeah, he violated the Logan Act by doing that, by acting on foreign diplomacy in an unofficial capacity. He's imitating an officer, a member of the government, by doing foreign diplomacy. Let's put him in prison for that. I think that's going to play into this too. I mean, I hate to say this, but I'm looking at some of the libertarians who've pointed out again, over and over, about the fact that Trump care is just basically whatever the government does is okay as long as it's my guy doing it, rather than their philosophy of the government shouldn't be doing anything. But they're looking over at this and seeing the persecution and wondering what it is that he can come back out and put out there. He might have the LP on board, and that is probably one of the biggest feats politically. And me being friends with a lot of the people in the LP, and knowing how they feel about what he did in his first term, and still saying, hey, we might vote for him if they keep persecuting him like this. That is definitely going to play in. One of the things that I brought up when we were talking about indictments was the fact that I think that they have hit their limit on the number of indictments that they can do without making it look obvious that it's a political witch hunt and a persecution. And yet Jack Smith is coming out here and folding up more and saying he's got more indictments in the tank, and he's got more of this, and they could put him in prison for 1,000 years at this point. All the same, I think with 19 plus Elon, they're getting upward of their limits of people they can throw accusations and possibly charges at, before it starts to look like they're going after and getting ready to put anybody who doesn't agree with what they have to say into camps. But what it's going to boil down to, not the indictments, not the culture war, not the media, not anything else, what it's going to boil down to, at the end of the day, on November 3rd, 2024, is it's the economy, stupid. When people look at where they are, what their purchasing power looks like, whether or not they've lost their house, or their job, or their car, or any number of other things, that's what they're going to carry forward going in on election day. My neoconservative cousin brought something up to me. And this was well before Trump. He brought up a concept to me. We were actually talking about the battle for abortion. Roe versus Wade, which prior to Trump was one of the bigger issues with the Evangelo-Con conservatives out there, was whether or not we got done with Roe versus Wade. I think that because my cousin at the time was very atheistic, I think he's come around at this point. Now being a new father, mazel tov to him, by the way, for that. Now being a new father, I think he's come around on the religious aspect, but at the time he was very atheistic. Very conservative, fiscally, as a business leader, and very atheistic. And he pointed out, we were talking about this, and he said that the Republican Party needs to excuse my language for this, needs to shut the fuck up about abortion and gay marriage right now. Let's get out there, let's get everybody back to work and fix the economy. And then once everybody's back to work, we can sit here and quibble until the day we die about who can get married and who can slaughter their kid. And that's what it's going to come down to at the very end of the day. Your social issues, which is basically all that Democrats have to run on. He might chain you to your stove. He might make you wear the red robe. It's going to be the Handmaid's Tale all over again. But I won't have starved to death, right? I'll still be alive, right? I can still put food on my table, right? Hunger is a very, very powerful motivator. One more thing on the economy and on the Biden admin. And again, this is going to be how the general fares for this. I was listening to Rogan while I was on a hike yesterday. And he had Bill Maher on earlier on in the week. I'd actually wanted to listen to the Tulsi Gabbard episode, which was a fantastic episode. But he had Bill Maher on. I think it was last Monday. Yeah, it must have been last Monday when Bill Maher was on. Which, I know a lot of people don't like Bill Maher because he's extreme liberal. That was a good listen. We're in a position right now where Bill Maher is making more sense than most of the morons running in the Republican primary. Which is terrifying, by the way. But to not praise Bill Maher and to point out where Democrats are at with this. Joe asked Bill. Now, they had not been talking about Donald Trump prior to this, but they had been talking politics. Joe had asked Bill if Biden's age was a factor. Point blank. His cognizance, his age. And Bill pointed out the fact that a lot of our friends on the left are very uncomfortable with. He pointed out the fact that Joe Biden is mentally incompetent. He has Alzheimer's. He is losing it. Bill Maher said that. But he no more than got those words out of his mouth and then completely flipped the conversation into Trump. Republicans, MAGA people, if you want to win in November, you have to, no matter who the primary candidate is, whether you hate Donald Trump and he's the primary candidate, whether you absolutely loathe Ron DeSantis and he winds up being the GOP candidate, the election in 2024 has to be a referendum on Joe Biden. Full stop, end of story. And the paid shills and the unpaid shills, like Bill Maher himself, and the people in the government, you're like your Nancy Pelosi's and your Hakeem Jeffries, desperately want you to talk about nothing but Donald Trump. A lot of people will notice, outside of the context of the crime, what they're trying to pin on him. I did not spend a lot of time on Contemporary talking about Donald Trump. I think it was the one day when he got indicted the first time, or the second time rather, because it was a federal one. I spent almost an entire show talking about that. But anytime I had the opportunity to put another story in front of Donald Trump, I did. It's part of the reason I took the month of September off too, is because I wanted to start looking through news and finding more ways to keep Trump at the bottom of the show and out of the conversation. No matter who the candidate is, no matter how you feel about that candidate, if you want to defeat Joe Biden in 2024, the conversation has to be about Joe Biden. End of story. And Bill Maher demonstrated why that's going to be difficult. Bill and Joe demonstrated it perfectly. Again, if you haven't listened to that episode, even if you absolutely loathe Bill Maher, and I know that a lot of YouTubers don't get ahead by telling you to go to listen to other content creators. But if you haven't listened to that episode, listen to the whole thing too. And I implore you, listen to the whole thing. Because Bill Maher just gave a how-to manual on how Democrats plan to win 2024. And that is, of course, anytime anybody talks anything about how bad the economy is under Joe Biden, how bad he is cognitively, how bad he is screwing up on the world stage, how he's falling down, any of the questions that we legitimately have, it's flip the script and turn it about Trump. Which is very easy to do because he's very controversial. A lot of people have an opinion on him, and even if he's not in the room, he tends to suck all the oxygen out of the room. The only conversation you should be having, don't even try to defend Trump. The conversation has to be about Joe Biden. Unless you want 4 more years of what you're experiencing right now. And that's the last thing that I have to say on this. Of course, go back and check out the Discord if you want to keep up on the conversation. If you want announcements on to when new videos are coming in, when I come back to live streaming, if you want to come in and make suggestions for games or share some memes or anything else like that, you can do that. You can follow me on X, formerly known as Twitter. I am at JEdgar102. You can go check out my Twitch and see my video game live streams, which will be coming back here in the next few weeks. Come back and go check that out. If you like what you see, obviously, you've heard YouTubers do this forever. I don't have to come back and reiterate it, but you know what to do. If you like what you see and where you go with this. The next one I'm going to do is Vivek Ramaswamy. I've got a lot of things to say about him. I've already said some of them in this video. And also go back and check out my Ron DeSantis video and see what I think about him. I think I was fair about him. And as I said on Contemporary, this is not going to become a Ron DeSantis hate channel. I dislike Ron DeSantis deeply, but I will give him a fair shake no matter what. But we'll see you here in the next video. I got some more of these planned that are not just presidential candidate videos. I want to do a video on gun control myths and how they're trying to put a registry in. I want to do one on wealth. I got even some culture war kind of stuff and cultural videos, and maybe even going back into my roots on dating. Plus, I will be setting up as soon as I'm done with this the new channel. I've actually got to reach out to Britt from Tweets by Britt to see when it is that she can come on for that, but we'll see you here next time for the Presidential Analysis Series and my other analysis series here, and take care, have a good night, we'll see you next time.